Francis, let's first talk about Israel and Iran. Give us up to speed. Tell us what happened this weekend, just so we're all on the same page, and then we'll proceed from there.
Sure. So we saw this unprecedented barrage of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones out of Iran. What makes it unprecedented is that it was the Iranian military attacking Israel. It wasn't Hezbollah. It wasn't the Houthis. It wasn't some third party. It was the Iranian military bombing Israel. And so it was, a direct attack using hundreds of weapons. And the Israeli military, with a little help from Jordan, maybe with a little help from Saudi Arabia, the Saudis are denying it, but they blocked 99% of these. They blocked 100% of the drones. They blocked 100% of the cruise missiles, and a few of the ballistic missiles got through. As far as we know, the only casualty is a young Arab Bedouin girl who was hit by shrapnel from the anti-missile systems, blowing up the missiles in the air. That's kind of where we're at. And so no significant damage outside of that one casualty in Israel. But if you go to Iranian state media, it's all about how devastating the attack was, what a success it was. They destroyed multiple Israeli military centers, which is not true, by the way. And so they're using this to bolster their own people. They did their usual street parties in Tehran on Saturday night. And now the world is kind of holding its breath, waiting for what is Israel going to do about this? Is there going to be a direct response? Is there going to be an attack on Iran? And are we heading into a conventional war for the first time in, 30, 40 years, as opposed to, targeted kinetic actions that we've been doing kind of post 9/11? Everybody's just holding their breath.
Okay, so my theory, and I have no reason to believe this, please disabuse me of this, is that Iran tipped everyone off, said, hey, Turkey, hey, America, we're going to do this just so we can look like we retaliated, and we'll save face, and we can just sort of stop it at that point. Is there any evidence of that? Is that a thing, or did I just make that up?
Well, there are reports that are kind of sources say reports that Iran told Turkey they were going to do it, and then the United States heard from Turkey, which is a NATO ally, that it was going to happen. There's an alleged report that Biden said that they basically greenlit the attack, which the White House is enthusiastically denying. I'm disinclined to believe that, just because you don't waste 300, missiles and drones on an attack that you want to be cosmetic. You use 2 drones for that, not 300. And it's an embarrassment because Iran is trying to sell these drones, these Shahed, the kamikaze drones. They've shown up in Ukraine. There's reports that they're trying to sell them off to the North Koreans, to the Russians. So if these drones just get shot, 100% failure rate, that's not really good for business. So if the intent here was to look good, if it was an aesthetic thing, a PR thing, then I don't think it went especially well.
This is from Joel Rayburn. I don't know if you know this cat. Former diplomat, U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, 2018 to 2021. He's at the Hoover Institute now. He I think, of course, more with you. He thinks this was an attack. And he said, he threw a couple of different elements in here. One of them is that the Iranians seized a vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. He says this is an Iranian threat to the Europeans and the U.S. that they're willing to shut down the Persian Gulf and Red Sea if clashes escalate. Is that happening as well?
Yes, we did have an incident of an interception of a vessel. I think it was a commercial vessel, and I think they let it go. But the message there is basically you don't only have to worry about the Houthis in the Persian Gulf. And this is, this recalls to me when President Obama was in office, there was an incident where the Iranian military intercepted a Navy ship. And there were these horrible images of U.S. servicemen on their knees with guns to their heads, yes. IRGC guns to their heads. And Obama didn't do anything about that. And that was kind of, I think, the low point of Obama foreign policy, where you have American soldiers on their knees. And I think Iran is kind of trying to send the message that that's where we're heading right now, that they feel emboldened enough that first it's an interception of a commercial ship, but if everything keeps up, if they don't keep getting their ransoms, they're going to start targeting naval forces. And I think that's what the threat is.
How much of a variable is the fact that the leader of Iran is an 85-year-old man and on his last throes of life? And if he's a true believer, then he'd take these final steps to destroy Israel in his lifetime. Is that a thing or no?
I think it's a thing. When you put it that way, it sounds a lot like us, right? We have this, geriatric leader who is in a desperate position, and the only thing really holding him back is that there's a deep bench of institutional leaders. There's a ton of Democrats waiting behind the scenes to seize power that are trying to develop foreign policy. You've got people like Blinken and Jake Sullivan trying to do things. Iran kind of has the mirror image situation, right? Because they have the Ayatollah is out there, and he's the supreme leader. He is the guy. But you also have President Raisi, who is a butcher, and he's younger, but he's not that younger. But you have all these people in the Iranian foreign ministry. You have IRGC commanders that are, fighting each other for power and trying to. There's a huge power struggle between the Iranian foreign ministry and the IRGC, which came to a head when Soleimani was in charge of the Quds Force, and the Iranian foreign minister came out and said, this guy keeps doing foreign policy that's supposed to be my job. So it is a factor, but I think there are so many other people vying for power within the Iranian political structure that if we wake up tomorrow and the Ayatollah dies, we're going to have the same regime with the same radical views, and I don't think it's going to stabilize anything if a 60-year-old takes over for the 85-year-old.
Yeah. For some reason, I think that there's a large difference, maybe one of the largest differences in the world, between the leadership of Iran and the people of Iran. Is that fair to think that that's very different than other countries?
I think it looks about like every, socialist authoritarian country. The Iranian people definitely do not support their regime. There's been a constant stream of documented acts of defiance against the regime for years now. They just have no organized leadership because that's what authoritarian regimes do. They prevent the organization of a political party. They prevent the rise of leaders that can unify the opposition. But to me, Iran looks a lot like China. It looks a lot like Cuba. It looks a lot like Venezuela. It even looks a lot like places like, not quite North Korea, because North Korea is so repressed that they really don't have anything. But, it looks like basically every authoritarian regime that is allied with Iran has a similar problem. And you have regular protests. And I think for Americans, it's kind of hard to understand because you'll turn on the international news and it'll be like, thousands of Iranians in the streets protesting again, and nothing ever changes. And that reminds me a lot of Cuba as well. There's been thousands of protests in Cuba in the past 2 years, and nothing changes. And it's because the authoritarian structure essentially snuffs out any attempt at a leadership structure or political organization. So all the people can do is take the streets once in a while and try to peacefully protest, and they get gunned down, they get imprisoned, they get executed. The rise in executions in Iran right now is astronomical because of that dissent. So that's kind of the situation is, yes, the people extremely oppose the regime in Iran, but they have no real way of toppling it. So all they can do is express themselves to the best of their ability, but they can't actually organize.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to our response. So what do you make of Biden's response to this attack against Israel?
It's a disaster. Biden came out and essentially, he said, Iran targeted military facilities, which to me came off as trying to justify the attack, trying to make it sound like less than it was. If you're shooting hundreds of missiles at your neighboring country, it doesn't matter what, especially a country the size of New Jersey, you're not gonna, you're going to kill people unless you have an extraordinary situation like.
Wait, I want to be clear. He said, because think about that in America. Think about if Mexico launched some missiles at us, and we're like, whoa, it was only at Fort Hood and Camp Pendleton.
Yes, exactly.
No go. So he really said that.
Yeah, well, his statement said Iran targeted military facilities. And, whether that's true or not, we don't even know because the attack was such a failure. Jordan was shooting missiles out of the sky. So we don't know. Those missiles never even reached Israel. We don't know what they were targeting.
Yeah.
So I thought that was unnecessarily giving too much benefit of the doubt to Iran.
Here, if I can interrupt one last time, sorry. It was the very first sentence of their statement. Earlier today, Iran and its proxies operating out of Yemen, Syria, and Iraq, although your first point was that this was Iran. This isn't a proxy thing, right?
It's not.
But launched an unprecedented air attack against military facilities in Israel. Wow, that's interesting to make that point. Wow, what a pickup on that. That's amazing, Frances. Well done.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure I'm not the first one to pick up on that, so I don't want too much credit. But that did very much rub me the wrong way. And then, there hasn't been a strong response. On the contrary, we're seeing leaks that we think are from the White House, that are saying that Biden is not ready to go all in to support Israel on a second Iranian attack, or that if Israel retaliates, that, they're on their own. The United States is not going to help. Now, the White House has refuted those anonymous source reports, but it says a lot that those reports are even out there. And to me, the problem with the way Biden is handling this is that for him, it's all about the election. For him, it's all about winning Muslim American voters in Michigan and in other battleground states. And it's not about the reality on the ground of this war and the constant genocidal threat out of Iran towards Israel, which is one of our strongest allies. And if you really do believe all the left-wing stuff out of the White House about LGBTQ rights and about women's rights and about climate change and about all this stuff, Israel's really the only country where you can be freely gay, where you can be a woman and not be afraid of being, actively repressed by your government. So there are legitimate left-wing reasons to support Israel. And they are not being articulated at all by this left-wing government. On the contrary, they're just trying to appease the most radical voters in their constituency.